Hello everyone and welcome. Tonight I'd like to introduce Project AP2 S2000. This is the S2000 that I was not supposed to buy, but yet here it is. So a little backstory. I already have an S2000. I have a 2003 AP1 and that car is currently under development. It's mostly stock on the exterior, but it's got a slew of engine mods and some suspension development. You can find the full details for that car here. The goal for that S2000 is to become my track day car S2000. Just something that I can toss a set of the 200 treadwear, high grip class tires on, drive it to a track day, hot lap it all day long, and then drive home without having to change tires or mess around with any trailers. So I didn't really have any intentions of buying another S2000, but I do love S2000s. In fact, it was the S2000 that really drove me to build my '99 all-motor Miata. That car was what happened when I didn't have an S2000 when I really wanted one. I built that to be an S2000 competitor. This car was a friend of mine, and over this past summer, he decided that he wanted to get rid of it. Now, during this time, this is when I had just closed on the new house in the garage, and I had a lot of renovations and rehab going on, and things were crazy. I really didn't have any business buying a car, but the deal was really good. And I think he wanted to see it kind of stay around and know that it was going to a good home, somebody who would take care of it and appreciate it. So I really had a hard time turning it down. I almost did, but I'm glad I didn't because I was able to, pull some strings, stretch myself thin, and make it work. But this car, once I got it, I didn't really know what my intentions were going to be for it, so I kind of had to think about that. Given that I already have an S2000 that I'm really developing, and this car is mostly stock, I think I'm going to focus more on kind of the fun mods for this car first, whereas other project cars of mine, I would dive right into motor, suspension, tearing everything apart, and refreshing everything. I'm not going to do that with this car. I'm going to leave this a little bit more street friendly and just kind of enjoy it for that. I have like a bet with myself in my own head that I can turn the S2000 into something that's like really hoonable. My overall impressions of the S2000, and I've owned my other one for 6 years now, is that the cars do not like to slide much. When you kind of bring them to that limit of grip, they get really out of shape, and they start to get a little bit snappier as you get closer to those limits. I think with the right suspension tuning and right wheel and tire combo, I can change that. So that's what my goal is going to be for this car. So let's talk a little bit about what's done to this car and what's going to happen to it in the future. This is a 2005 Formula Red, new Formula Red. It's the last year of the AP2 S2000s. It's still drive-by cable throttle, not drive-by-wire. Arguably one of the most desirable S2000s, which is another reason why I had a hard time really turning it down. The exterior of the car, it has a Muse R1 front bumper. This is my most favorite bumper for the S2000. I absolutely love the design, the way it stretches the nose a little bit further. It's not too aggressive and it doesn't really look aftermarket. It can almost pass as a stock bumper. It's one of my favorite pieces, so that was another reason why I had a hard time turning down this deal. The wheel and tire package on this, it has a set of 17x9, positive 40 millimeter offset raised 57 extreme wheels. Now, I think this is a fantastic looking wheel, and given the pointy shape of the S2000, this really complements those edgy lines of it, especially with this aggressive concave in here. However, the fitment on these wheels in a 17x9, they stick out quite a bit. This is a claimed S2000 sized offset, but in my opinion, it is not S2000 size. I mean, I'm looking at a good inch out past the fender line here. Even with rolled fenders, front and rear, I still get rubbing when I'm driving aggressively. The ride height is a little bit conservative because of that. So that's something that I'm going to have to address going forward. It's at the point now where I can throw the car around, but it's under heavy bumps or when the suspension really loads up, I do get slight rubbing still in the rear. The last of the exterior mods on this car, and this is another beautiful piece, and again, arguably my favorite hardtop out of all the offerings for the S2000, is this Forbidden brand Mugen style double-sided carbon hardtop. I really wish deep down that Honda made the S2000 a fastback coupe, and I think this just kind of complements the car the best, giving it almost like a semi-fastback look without making it look really wonky coming to the trunk line. Whereas like the spoon style tops that are the full fastback, I think it just doesn't mesh right because the car was never meant to be a coupe. The interior of this car is 100% bone stock, and this is actually one of the first places that I'm going to start to address because I already have some stuff in stock that's just kind of sitting around collecting dust, so this gives me a good excuse to start installing things. And I'm not a big fan of the AP2 steering wheel, so that's another thing that I want to get rid of pretty quickly. As far as engine modifications go, this car is relatively stock. It has a carbon radiator shroud with intake inlet, the channel coil there. There's a Burke Technologies high flow catalytic converter on it, and that follows through into a Greddy Spectrum Elite catback exhaust, which is a 70mm dual outlet exhaust. So it's 70, and at the Y split to the two canisters, it goes 60mm back. The suspension on this car is a set of Tane Street Flex. This is a twin tube style damper that kind of replaced the regular Flex model and is meant more for street duties, but still capable of some track day work. And there's a set of blocks, axle spacers at the rear to accommodate the lower ride height. So that's pretty much all that this car has done to it. Now, initial impressions of this car, comparing it to my AP1, because this has all the revisions to the suspension. So that's the replaced upper control arms in the rear, the revised rear subframe and suspension geometry, different sway bar sizes, etc., etc. The differences are noticeable, but it's kind of funny because this car oversteers a little bit more than my AP1 does. I do notice a difference in the weight. The weight of this car is about 150 pounds heavier on the scales than my AP1 is. Now, granted, when I weighed my AP1, I had already replaced the stock exhaust and the stock exhaust manifold and other things that contributed to weight loss. So there was a little bit more there, but I do think driving them back to back, the AP1 still feels a little bit lighter on its feet. Part of that's probably a result of the faster steering rack that's on the AP1 versus the AP2. They actually slowed the rack down. The flywheel on the AP1 S2000 is around 7 pounds lighter than the AP2, plus the AP2 has incorporated the clutch delay valve, which is something that I really don't like. It kind of slips the clutch as you release it to help smoother gear engagement, whereas like the AP1, you just kind of have to speed up your inputs with your clutch work and your shifts to match the revs as they'll drop faster because there is no clutch delay valve. It's an easy mod to get rid of. You literally just replace the slave cylinder, and that's another thing I want to do to this. But the second part of it is going with a lighter flywheel setup, which the AP2 has a heavier setup. At the limit, I will say that the AP2 is noticeable. The way the car slides in an oversteer situation, it's more progressive, and it's easier to kind of play with the balance of the car with the throttle. Combine that with the shortened 1 through 4 gears of the AP2, which give a little bit more torque output at the rear wheels, plus the bigger displacement of the motor makes the AP2 a little bit more hoonable, easy to pitch with the gas on sharper turns on the street, which is another reason why I'm going to leave the AP1 for the track day stuff and the AP2 for the street duty stuff. The AP1 being a 2-liter, having the power band up high and utilizing those high RPMs, that's where that's really going to shine. It's not going to make as much of a difference, AP1 versus AP2, is when you're in that power band all the time. The other thing is, and it's almost kind of a little bit of a disappointment, is that the VTEC range in the AP1, going up to that last 1,000 RPM that the AP1 has over the AP2, is really noticeable. And it's funny because driving them back to back, you would swear that the AP2 almost feels a pinch slower. But when you actually line them up and you go side by side, the AP2 will nose ahead by about a half of a car. So one of the things I may look into doing is changing the camshafts in the AP2 as they are less aggressive than what comes stock in the regular F20C engine, and raising the rev limit on it to like around 8,600 RPM, and that's about where piston speed matches that of the F20. So I don't know what the ultimate long-term goals are going to be for the motor work on this car, because I'm building my AP1 to be an all-motor, high-revving, naturally aspirated setup. I don't know if I want to go that route in this car, because then I'm going to end up with 2 redundant cars. With my Miatas, I justified having both of them is because they were 2 extremes. My 91 Miata is turbocharged, makes a lot of power, and it's a completely different experience than my 99, which is all motor, individual throttle bodies, cams, compression, etc. So it's got that high revving, you know, exciting, exhilarating engine experience to it. If I do all motor mods to this car, I'm going to end up in the same boat for both. So I've considered, and it won't be anytime soon, but I have been considering possibly doing a Rotrex supercharger setup on it. I like the packaging of them. I think they work well in the space given. I like the heat benefits of them because they run a little bit cooler than the traditional root style setups, and you can intercool them rather easily. So that's something that I may look into doing down the road in the future. It really kind of depends on how crazy I go with my AP1 and how streetable I leave it versus what's going to happen with this car. So that's Project AP2 S2000. And going forward over this winter, like I said, I'll be doing some of the fun mods. So we have some stuff for the interior plans and everything else. So this will be the introduction, Journal 1, and we'll move on to other ones in the near future. Thank you very much for watching. Done.
Beautiful